Next slide, please. So historically, the city only bring forward any personnel changes during the middle year budget and the new budget process. So this slide show the request personnel classification and position changes for this year. This are changes for Park and Rec department, very straightforward. I'm not sure if HR director online or maybe Margaret can help if you guys have any questions regarding this item. Next slide, please. So now will be a good place to stop and see if anybody have question, comments to move on. We will ask a motion for the resolution to have two items. One is resolution to amend fiscal year 22-23 adopt budget for estimated revenue and expenditure. And the second resolution is for authorized position amendments.
Thank you. Yes, Vice Mayor Coulson.
Thank you. I just had a clarification question. It's on page 3 of the staff report. There's a City of Burlingame summary of general fund revenues. There's an interest income slide, and we had in 2021 we had a positive interest of almost 8 million, and then last year we had interest rates rise, so we had a negative 4.7 million, which I assume is the losses due to interest rates rising.
Yep.
And then we have a current budget of 1.5 and a new projection of 1.5. So that I assume sort of looks at and projects where we think, the Fed is going to do with interest rates and any more additional losses we might have on the portfolio.
So I think for this line item is really hard to kind of project. So basically I have two factors. For interest income, one line item is real interest income we earn from, for example, LAIF or CAM or those kind of investment. The other one is each year at the year end, we do mark-to-market adjustment. It's not really gain or loss, it's more on the paper. So for auditing perspective, we have to adjust our, so it's not, sometimes if you don't sell the investment, you're not going to incur real loss.
Right.
So therefore, we are saying in real investment income, we still have income come in, but kind of it's really hard to project.
And we'll offset it with any potential realized losses. Okay, so that number makes sense. I just was kind of curious how that came about, but I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for the director, the finance director? Seeing none, then we are being asked to approve resolutions both to amend the adopted budget from last year and also to authorize position amendments. Does anybody want to describe those position amendments, or is that a separate item, or how do you want to handle
Can you go back to previous slide? Yeah. So this.
Oh, I'm sorry, there was.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Oh, thank you. So having received the presentation, let's open it up for public comment if there is any. Okay, and there's nobody here. Yes, Councilmember Beach.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to thank the finance director for a great report. It's overall, I think, pretty good news. And I would make a motion to adopt the resolution to amend the fiscal year 22-23 adopted budget for estimated revenues and expenditures.
Second. A motion by Councilmember Beach, seconded by Councilmember Ortiz. Could we have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Stevenson?
Yes.
Councilmember Beach?
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Coulson?
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg?
Yes. And who would like to make a motion to approve the reclassification of those positions? So moved.
I'll second.
Motion to reclassify the positions as stated by Councilmember Ortiz, seconded by Vice Mayor Coulson. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Stevenson?
Yes.
Councilmember Beach?
Yes.
Councilmember Ortiz?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Coulson?
Yes.
Mayor Brownrigg?
Yes. Thank you very much. So that passes 5-0. It might So what we've done tonight is looked at the budget as it's actually come to be, sort of 3/4 in almost to the fiscal year. And then we will start doing the 23-24 budget cycle in when do we do that?
So actually, we are working on the budget right now, and then we are hoping, bring to council, we should reschedule May 10th for
May
the
10th.
study session. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think it'll be interesting to look at that. I mean, there's so much volatility, both on the expense side and on the revenue side. So I think on that one, we'll probably really want to take some time and look at what we think is going to happen over the next couple of years. So, but thank you very much for this correction. And as Councilmember Beach said, I think it's mostly good news from where we might have been. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
That takes us then to our draft CIP program, which is where
All
we
Actually,
place.
we have a 5-year
Oh, sorry.
review. Yeah. So,
Stuff.
We have the 5-year forecast first.
Oh, it's on the next part of it. Sorry. I beg your pardon. So let's go to the 5-year point.
yeah, so, okay, now motion passed, and then let's review 5-year forecasting. Next slide, please. So here's the overview of the agenda for the 5-year forecasting, and then we will review the city's top revenue with our projection for next 5 years and the expenditure. As I mentioned previously, the current year budget newly adjustment with the mid-year usually set a stage for next fiscal year. So for 22-23 column in 5-year forecasting will be most accurate of all the years. So the number for 23-24 are not the final number, is still very preliminary. So just keep that in mind. So the number come forward in May will be have many deviation from this number you see tonight. So next slide, please. So here's the Burlingame revenue mix for 22-23 as adjusted. There are some major changes in the pie from pre-pandemic level. For TOT tax used to be largest one, now it's become the third one. So property tax right now have much bigger pie in all three, those category, about 39%. Next slide, please. So this graph showing you all the major general fund revenues. You look at the blue bar, the property tax, very steady growth. The orange part is the sales tax, relative recover well. See a small drop for 22-23 actually, as the inflation had put some pressure for consumer spending. For the TOT tax, you can see there's a huge drop for 2021, actual 5.7, the gray area. So for 21-22, the actual, we see an increase almost double, actually more than double for the TOT tax. And then we see continued growth about $15.7 million for current fiscal year. So other revenue is relatively stable. Next slide, please. So here's our projection for property tax. City is currently working with HDL property tax division on projection. And then we are anticipating average growth of 4 to 5% going forward. The recent growth in the housing price is certainly a contributor for the health growth in the property tax. So beside the assessment value assumption in the property tax, we also continue putting in the flat amount for excess ERAF. This year, we include about $3.2 million for next 5 years. Even though the counties always tell us this is kind of one-time revenue, treated one-time revenue, but based on current trend, we continue to have confidence about 3.2 million. This is about property tax. Can you next slide, please? So for the sales tax, this is very flat compared with the last few years. Our tax consultant HDL also provide the numbers and the analysis for the sales tax. The city sales tax category actually include 3 things in there. It's our regular sales and use tax, a Measure I, as well as public safety Property 172 tax. So Burlingame forecasting provide for actually for 0.1% for regular sales tax for next year and the 2.7 for 24-25. In terms of measure I, we include for next year is a negative increase 0.7% based on the consultant number and 2.3% for fiscal year 24-25. Those kind of information, we are built in 2% for the out years for next 3 years out years. So this is the sales tax piece. Here's the chart showing again about the TOT tax. You can see, lowest point 5.7, and for next few years we are building and 27.55% escalator. Depending on next few months how much will come in, we might adjust this percentage as needed. So yeah, we try to be more conservative. So on this TOT tax projections.
Sorry. Yes, I'm sorry.
No worries. I'm sorry. The difference between the red line and the gray,
Mhm.
what is that again? I didn't.
So for the gray one is the current, we build in this projections, but the red one is kind of if we're looking more positively because for example, we are as December we collect 1.2 and then actually in January 1.3 for the next few months we leveled out conservatively, put a $1 million each month, but we are hoping it can be better. If we're doing better, then we might have potential have more better trending. So
Okay, so one's like an optimistic scenario, one's like a likely scenario.
thank you.
Okay, great. Well, let's hope for the optimistic. Right.
Thank
Do that in green next time.
we'll change color.
Smiley faces.
Thank you. So it's showing here to highlight year-to-date revenue growth as a different rate because each revenue source is impacted by many different factors. So it is particularly true when we project out each category 5 years out. As we recall early the slide, revenue are projected to come in 6.9%, then anticipating for fiscal year 22-23. So now we have base year for 5-year forecasting. We did not include any economic slide or recession in this forecasting, even though we somewhat due for recession, especially last week, all the bankruptcy coming in the news is not so good for us.
Yes, Madam Scott. Yes, please, Councilmember Beach.
One quick question. The ERAF, that's figured into the property tax line for these projections? Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
I'll call it out. Anyhow.
Thanks. So yeah, this projection certainly built with some news, which can be. We did confirm with our investment company, PFMM, the city did not invest in any of those kind of the 3 banks. So next slide, please. Thank you. For 5-year forecasting expenditure assumption apply to each major expenditure category to forecasting salary and wages. Historically, we are using current payroll and the MOU put in consideration. Most pay increase are effective either January 1st or July 1st. In other words, we are drawing up this preliminary budget for next year, assume no change to the number of positions in the workforce. This year, we have completed negotiation or close for a resolution for a few contract that end of December 31st, 2022. Our HR director is currently working on a new round of negotiation that going to be expired June 30, 2023. With that, the current forecasting for salary is using current year budget and apply escalator. We will have more refined number as we have more information regarding labor negotiation, as well as we are do budget projection for 23-24 in more depth. For project benefit is quite a different. There actually have 17 different benefit line item to consider. So it's a lot of work involved. The large portion benefit, it's almost about 72% is come from 2 line item. One is employer contribution pension, and the other line is employer share of active employee health benefit coverage. So the CalPERS pension cost are based on blend rate that calculated by city's actuary consultant. I think it's worth to mention here for Burlingame, the classic employee do contribute to employer share of the PERS cost. So for 50 member contribute additional 4% of their pay to helping fund employer share of the contribution, and the miscellaneous employee, they are contribute additional 1.5%. So yeah, that's great for the city perspective. For operating costs include contract supplies and the material. They are projected with fairly broad brush assumption. For internal service fund, we using different escalator to build those internal service fund budget. Some line item is between 2 to 5%. We are seeing increase, particularly in costs of about facility maintenance, IT infrastructure, as well as insurance liability funding need for those category. For capital outlay, we're using a base of $200,000 and then build a 3% escalator. Those kind of like small capital outlay, like furniture's equipment, is not bigger capital. It's more capital in the operating sense.
Sure.
How question?
So I look at a lot of financial numbers and a lot of financial forecasts. I would find it when we do this in the future, I'd find it helpful when we're looking especially at forecasts, if there's growth, if you could just calculate what the percentage growth is, because it's really helpful to be able to see what the percentage assumptions are of growth. I just, I quickly did it on the last one, and it's interesting. It's not a flat projection, but it's very helpful to know what the percentages are. And then the other thing that would be helpful, and I'm not sure what the right ratio is, but when you're trying to understand where our cost structure is versus historic, it's sometimes helpful to be able to look at a ratio. So for example, it might be salaries and wages as a percentage of total costs, or equivalent in the business world to a gross margin or an operating margin, because then you can see how that changes over time and you can kind of tell what's happening to the enterprise. So just ways to help all of us sort of see what's happening a little bit, I think might be useful.
Great suggestions. Really appreciate the council members' finance savvy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No worries.
it just occurred to me. Thanks.
Thank you. So here is the 5-year forecasting for expenditures. No change have made to assumption for revenue expenditure regarding for any federal policy changes impact to our projections. And then no changes for future development or service need associated with that, and no change for enhanced program. So pretty much baseline budget projections here. Next slide, please. So there are a lot line item behind all these numbers for this slide. So if you look at the debt service, it's remain fairly level. You can see the total requirement are growing faster than the resources for next few years. So we are continue to see deficit spending, and then we'll need using the fund balance or other funding sources to help bridge this gap.
Yes, please, Vice Mayor Colson.
Thank you. So I think one thing I think it's important to note here is that we're running a deficit, but we're running a deficit because we're transferring significant amount of money into our CIP, into our debt service, and the 7.2 million, it's over 10 million this year, and almost 17, 18 million next year. So and the reason I say that is because if somebody was just looking at this and they were just seeing red deficit spending, I think people would become alarmed that maybe as fiduciaries, we weren't being, mindful of our responsibility to put together a balanced budget. But given the fact that we have some savings, we've had some excellent reserves, and we still have that net balance sitting over there, as well as all the other reserves. That's how we're able to do it. And I just don't know how quite to articulate it, but I think Possibly, Mr. Mayor, one thing we could do is, maybe a follow-up meeting where we just sort of highlight some of these things, way to footnote them, or, some of these changes to report might be really good. But I just don't want people to get concerned or alarmed over the red numbers.
Great
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
I concur with the Vice Mayor. Yes, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mayor Brownrick. I also agree with Vice Mayor Coulson. It would be helpful, particularly if there's anything of significance in terms of change, what the underlying assumption was, whether it was a revenue growth or a planned expenditure, in a comment column to the right,
Mhm.
and then any tangent or salient footnotes at the bottom, just so that, people can get a sense, to your point, Vice Mayor Coulson.
I appreciate that commentary. I mean, in a slightly different way, I think everyone has grown up with and realizes that the federal government can spend money it doesn't have, but we can't. And so when you see numbers like this, I think a perfectly reasonable resident might say, well, where's that money coming from? And I think that's what Vice Mayor Coulson is alluding to. If we somehow, whether it was even just having, the unassigned fund balance and it's then debited and then it's zero, so we're running a balanced budget because of course we have to one way or another. So I think that's where you're sort of going with that. I would concur. That would be helpful, I think.
Great point. I think you're so true. For example, 23-24 year, we transferred $7.2 million for CIP. And then we did it strategically or dealing with the pandemic issue. Last couple of years, we only did $3.12 million. Now we double it. We certainly provide more funding to capital needs. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I was just saying, and the pension trust, that's so
Right,
important that we're doing too.
Yes, that's
So
right.
It's another.
Right.
Thank you. So for this slide, just a reminder. So even, so we don't lose sight of, we still always want to keep a funding capital project and other long-term need in mind when we talk about the financial sustainability. So that's just kind of few project on our checklist. So with that, before I conclude my presentation, I want to express my sincere appreciation to City Manager Lisa Goldwine and all the department head in the audience and many individual contributor from our department and the entire finance team for their guidance, support, contribution. Last but not least, we appreciate all the council members' leadership and then financial, very financial savvy, to managing our city's financial measures. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Vice Mayor Coulson.
Thank you. The longer term priority projects, I really appreciate because it highlights the infrastructure needs. We've already mentioned setting aside the 15 million on the grade separation, the sea level rise mitigation, which is kind of an unknown number. And then again, the El Camino Real undergrounding, which we're going to get closer and closer to. And then city facilities, City Hall, appreciate that we're moving that up. Looking forward to working with Councilman Ortiz on that project. But I would also just add, even though I know it's maybe a 5 or 10 year out, but I really think it's important to capture here is our parks, courtyard, which is really in need of renovation. And again, I know we might not deal with it for 7 or 8 years, but I feel like it's important just to have it on the list since we've been talking about it for a very long time. And someday we are going to need to do it, and it will be a fairly large expenditure. And it just helps us when thinking about capital longer than, 3 to 5, 7 years to have the whole picture in. If it would be my colleagues' pleasure, if they would agree with that.
Yes, no, I think that's a good point. I think maybe this also comes up in the next item when we look at CIP priorities to talk about whether the courtyard rises to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments about the forecast? So I appreciate it too. I wonder whether we are underestimating salaries and wages a little bit in the out years, to be honest. But I'm comfortable with this forecast as it stands. I think to the extent that inflation doesn't get beaten back by the Fed in the next 12 months, I think we're probably light on that forecast beyond the contracts would be my guess. But again, we don't have to cross that bridge. So thank you. Yes, Councilman.
Just an additional comment. Thank you, Mayor Brownrigg. I think the impact of inflation doesn't just touch salaries and other things. It may have a profound effect on the business travel or even recreational travel associated with our TOT.
Yep.
So despite recovery over the last 12 months to 18 months from a TOT standpoint, I think we need to be thoughtful about what that might impact. And certainly as we go into fiscal year 23-24.
That's a good comment. Yes, Vice Mayor Colson.
And I completely agree, capturing the inflation as it begins to manifest and we begin to understand it and sort of magnifying it through will be important. But also, we're adding 6,000 potential residents over the next 10 years. That means we're probably going to need more police officers, potentially more fire department, more staff at the community center. So we at some point might have to take a more structural look at that and really do an enhanced dive on this to try to think about, is like, for example, with Chief Matucci, is it really 42 sworn, or do we need to think about that we're going to need to be 45? And do we need another fire department station? So it's not for tonight, and I don't think it's in the 5-year forecast now, but this could be a very good planning session conversation for next year's annual planning retreat, is to think a little more about the budget, what it looks like in the future. So I'll just end it at that.
Good point, agreed.
Yeah, I endorse that comment too. Okay, so I think we're done. We don't need to do a motion on the 5-year or anything like that. Thank you very much for the hard work. So that then now takes us to the CIP program.
Mhm.
Mayor Brownrigg, I'm sorry, can I stop this? We can't hear Syed at all. So Syed, you might need to go sit where Helen was sitting and then have Kevin sit there as well. Thank you.
Can you hear me better now?
That's-
Okay, good. So I was responding to Vice Mayor Colson's comments regarding the Parks Yard project to address a facility is getting dilapidated. I was mentioning that the city has a facilities master plan.
Can I ask you to hold for a second? So Mr. Okada, if you'd like to, I think this mic probably works. Okay. Why don't we do a quick sound check before we keep going?
Hello, hello.
That works.
Perfect. Okay.
Great.
We have 2 minutes.
Thank you. So I was going to say that the project is in the plans, master plan, and it will be advanced as it gets prioritized in the future and will be included in the 5-year program in the future.
Thank you.
Just since we're on the subject though, I became more sensitive to this when I was on the fire board, that when accommodations are substandard, especially when you're in a facility that has both men and women. It's really not fair. And so to the extent that we have some ability to move that up, I think personally that feels very appropriate. So
Definitely, I'll take a note of that.
Mr. Okada.
Good evening. I'm Kevin Okada, Senior Civil Engineer. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council. I'm honored to present the budget for the General Fund CIP for fiscal year 23-24. Slide, please. So this shows the agenda of the outline of topics. We're going to go over the requested proposed CIP funding, the general fund CIP, and the different sources that we're going to use to alleviate pressure on the general fund. We'll then provide a summary and ask for council direction and feedback. Next slide, please. This shows the proposed draft CIP funding by source. General fund, 5.22 million. Measure I, 1 million for sidewalks, 1 million for streets. We're also requesting more impact fees this year, 2.4 million, 2 million from developer contributions, and we have a number of grants that we've applied for and been awarded. Next slide, please. This slide shows a program by category. What's important here to show is the programs and the magnitude. This slide does not include the street resurfacing and the parking lot fund. Next slide, please. Here are the Parks and Recreation requests, and Director Glomstad is here for any specific questions on these. The first project is the Cuernavaca field renovations and ADA improvements. We're requesting $3 million of general fund. This project has been postponed a number of years due to COVID, and this is to replace the field with synthetic turf. The next project is the town square. This is where the old post office is. We're requesting $800,000 of general fund for design. We've also requested $2 million from the developer fees. And this project also has 1.75 of federal and state grants. We will also request additional construction funds in later fiscal year to fully fund this project. This project is the Burlingame Square Transit Hub, also called the Mobility Hub. This is by Burlingame Station and Burlingame Avenue. There's currently a shortfall, and we've applied for and received $200K of additional grant funding. Those canyon slide repairs. There's been a lot of rain lately, a lot of landslides. So we're requesting $250K of general fund money to make those repairs. The next two funds are synthetic turf replacement funds. These were not funded last fiscal year, and we're requesting a total of $350K of general funds for these two funds. The project is the Bayside parking lot and EV chargers. This is an additional $100K for general fund to fully fund the design. Project is $100K for general fund for the softball batting cages at Washington Park. And the next three projects are funds for playground replacement, athletic fields, and annual tree replacement for a total of $170K. Total parks for general fund is 4.72 million, and the total funding a little less than 7 million.
Can I ask couple of questions on this particular list? The town square under grants and revenue says 2 million. That's which 2 million?
It was 1.75 for the grant. There was, I believe, was it 1 million for state and 750 for federal, and then the 2 million.
That's exactly right.
Developer contribution.
So in total, it would be closer to 5 million, right?
And it's not fully funded. We'll request additional funds later.
Sorry, no, I'm not being clear.
So the grants and revenue line should actually say 3.75, right? Because we do have the federal money of 750,000 from former Representative Jackie Spear, and we have the $1 million from former Assembly Member Kevin Mullen from the state budget.
And then on top of that, we have the contribution from the private developer.
Correct.
So, right. So the total funding that we've identified that we actually have in hand is higher than this was my
Right. Well, we don't have the 750 in our hot little hands yet, but we will soon. We have to fill out all the paperwork, but yes, essentially it's our money.
That's great. Thank you so much. And then the Cuernavaca synthetic turf, that's on the baseball field / soccer field. Is that what's getting turfed?
I believe so.
Yes. So does that mean the end of the dog run? Which is always too bad for people who like it.
They're not supposed to be on any of our fields. But they could still,
Oh, contrary.
they have
We're allowed there in certain times.
certain times. But they also still have the upper field that's still there. And people still bring their dogs on this synthetic turf.
Do they?
They do it up at Murray Field, yeah, and throw the ball.
Yes, please.
And I just as a reminder, as a member of the Dog Park Task Force, we also have a 3-acre park that is in very close proximity to Cuernavaca. If people want to take their dogs there.
True. Sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack us. Thank you. Oh, yes, Councilmember Beach.
Just one more question for Director Glomstead. Since we're talking about it, there's a cost benefit analysis of redoing a grass field, which is, lots of irrigation, the maintenance that goes into that versus a turf field, which then requires, making sure that we have a replacement fund and that. Could you just speak to that thought process with the parks team and our master planning for the benefit of the public, how we think about these things?
So all the park projects we're doing, one, we're always looking at ways to conserve water, which is a big struggle, and synthetic turf is definitely a way to do that. But we also look at the uses you get out of the field. So what's been happening right now for every natural grass area we have, they're closed. They're too wet to be used. So you have a lot more reduced usage and availability in the city. So everyone is fighting for one specific field because we have one city field. We do have 2 synthetic turf fields on the elementary school district sites that we use. So we're always looking at increasing usage, which would be another thing. But the other thing for all our projects, all our facilities, because they haven't been done, are not ADA compliant. And there's a lot of concern with them. So we're always looking at how we can improve ADA and accessibility to those sites. And Cuernavaca in particular, because of where it is, we have some struggles. There's a lot of boggy areas out in the outfield. We actually have problems with mosquitoes, believe it or not. It has very poor drainage, so we're hoping that will resolve it. So it's not just one thing, it's kind of like a trifecta of things we're working on every time we look at doing a field.
Thank you for that insight.
Yeah, thank you. Vice Mayor Colson, want to add something?
I just want to ask if it's okay to ask Director Glomstead one additional question. So I'm so happy to see that there is money set aside for the Washington Park girls softball batting cage. This is a long time project I've been working on, I think 20 years. Is 100,000 completely fund the project or okay, so how does that all come together?
So when they started planning for a batting cage there, the council allocated $100,000 for the infrastructure work. And then they were going to fundraise and build the rest of it. But that was many years ago now. So the infrastructure costs have gone up, but the infrastructure costs are also a large amount of that cost. The design they had at the time, I think they can scale back and reduce what they'll end up paying. Our plan is they're planning on raising some funds. And when they're ready to move forward, we'll do the infrastructure costs. Which would be the base, whatever it be, the electrical. So all they'll need to do is plop down whatever they're doing and hook up to whatever we've put in.
I have some just my only comment on that is that for 20 years, the girls have not had the opportunity to have a batting cage. And it's it's kind of sad. And I think as council, we're responsible for making sure that we have a gender neutral policy. It has not been a friendly place for the girls to participate in the boys batting cage. It's a different kind of a machine. It's a different setup. It's not welcoming, let's just say, for them to participate in there, whether it's, you know, even if it's pitching, batting, hitting, whatever it may be. And so I would just, you know, ask my colleagues to kind of think about that. It is, you know, that organization provides softball, and so does BYBA. So this is fair of both of them. This is not a, you know, a $1,000 a year travel ball thing. It costs girls about $125, $100 to play. They provide scholarships for everyone who can't. This is an everybody play, everybody enjoy it, everybody be there organization and thing. We do produce a lot of girls that, you know, go on and play at high school and have a wonderful time. And, you know, it's literally 15, 20 years and we still don't have equal access for the girls. And I think it's shameful. And I really hope that we as a council can maybe think about how to reallocate some funds. It's very hard for this group to raise funds. They all volunteer, you know, trying to keep the costs down low, and to ask them to raise $100 or $150 or $200,000, you know, out of 200 maybe or 150 families is really, really hard. And what happens is, you know, they play for 4 or 5 years and they sort of cycle through. So somebody starts it, but you're never really there long enough to see it through. And so I think it's at some point incumbent upon us to try to figure out how to close that funding gap. You know, I hope we can do it through our own funds. I know we're really thin this year with money and we're already running a negative deficit, but anyone who has any ideas or thoughts, I would so welcome them.
Councilmember Beach.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Coulson. I think that's a great suggestion. I think for all the reasons you said, I was under the impression that was funding the whole thing. Maybe I just forgotten or talking about it for so long. So maybe we can, I would be in favor of further exploring options. Thank you.
Mr. Stevenson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you, thank you, Mayor Brownrigg and Vice Mayor Coulson. I think we have to think about our neutrality policy and that make sure that there's an equity component in that, because sometimes I think that gets overlooked. And this might be a perfect example where, yes, there are programs for both, you know, for all sorts of sports and access, but the reality is, are we supporting them from an equity standpoint? And I'd be also echoing Councilmember Beach and Vice Mayor Coulson on reallocating or at least looking into how we could do that.
So if I may, summing up, ask the director to come back with a budget ask for the entire amount, and then we could debate that as a council and whether we think that's a sensible investment.
Yeah, we can do that.
Are you all right? with that,
Absolutely.
Councilmember Ortiz?
Great.
Certainly, if we were a university, we'd have to do a lot more than that, right? So,
Ask Cal.
so thank you very much.
Thank you, colleagues. I so appreciate this. This is really important and I appreciate you guys all chipping in. Thank you very much.
Thank you for bringing it up.
Thanks for your leadership.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was a feel-good moment and I stepped on it. But I did have a favor, which is if we could make a note in our e-newsletter about the Mills Canyon investment, and then maybe in that blurb also tell people, I know I asked this before at City Council, but how people can volunteer, because I routinely will meet people in Mills Canyon who'd like to help. So perhaps that could be a
We'll make a note of that.
perfect. Thank you so much.
Next
Oh,
slide.
God, sorry about that. Sidetrack there.
Important stuff. The next slide is the bicycle, pedestrian, and traffic improvements. I have a few slides after this for some of the grant funding that we're doing and go over these in more detail. The first project is the North Rollins Road bicycle and pedestrian improvements. We're requesting 800K of impact fees to fund design, and we will receive a $3.1 million grant. The California Drive Class 1 bike improvements. This is from Oak Grove to Burlingame Avenue. We were requesting 180K of impact fees for design, and we will have received a $1.62 million grant for this project. This project is the sidewalk repairs program. We're requesting 1 million of Measure I funds, 200K of general fund, and 100K of gas tax to fund curb and gutter repairs. Next project is the Rollins Road Traffic Calming Project. We're requesting 190K of Measure A funds to fund design, and we've received a 440K grant for this project. Project is the Occidental Bike and Pedestrian Improvements. We're requesting 180K of Measure A funds for the design, and we have received 435K of grants for this project. Project is the Broadway grade separation. We're requesting 600K from the Capital Reserve, which will fund the city contribution for the construction management and general contractor contract. Project is the Old Bayshore Highway Complete Streets Project. We are requesting 500K of impact fees to fund the design. And we are also chasing after additional grants to fund this project for construction. The next project is the Vision Zero Action Plan. This is a strategy to eliminate fatalities and severe injuries. We are applying a SDOT grant in the summer of 200K, and we're requesting additional 100K of general fund. 3 are for traffic studies, citywide pedestrian safety, and traffic calming, which is a total of 200K of general fund. So we're requesting a total of 1.5 million of general fund in Measure I. We're receiving or will receive almost 6 million of grants for a total of a little less than 10 million for total pedestrian traffic improvements. Next slide.
I'm sorry, can I stop you again?
Sure.
First of all, a quick thank you to Councilmember Beach for reminding us about the importance of Vision Zero as a plan. The Old Bayshore Complete Streets project, what's the status of that? Have we finalized the design?
Mr. Mayor, I will step in here. The last year, City Council approved the feasibility study and design and selected the design alternative. And we are currently in the process of seeking funds as part of this budget process, as well as also applying for federal earmark funds to see if we can kickstart the design and prepare the construction documents. That's where the project is right now.
So, sorry, we do or we do not have a final design for the street?
We have design concept, but we do need to complete the engineering, design, and construction documents for that.
From a process point of view, will it go back through the Traffic Safety and Parking Commission?
Yes, it will. It will go back. It will from a concept. It has already been approved, but now as we proceed with the design, we will have some public outreach, public input, as well as we'll have Teaspoon look at that.
I'd appreciate it. I'm sure others would, because there's significant development along that stretch of road, and making sure we're thinking about the road as it's going to be, not the road as it is, I think is really important. Okay.
That's correct.
Yes, Councilor Beach.
Thank you. Very excited to see these incredible investments in our bike pedestrian traffic improvements. When we review this later, I would find it helpful too. It's wonderful that you've called out the measure A, the gas tax, and the SB1, or the grants that we'll be applying for. But in the grants revenue, there's certainly a lot to celebrate there, but the breakdown of where those origins come from, I think, would be something to see how we stitch it all together, whether they came from Measure A or Measure W, or safe routes to school, or what have you.
Sure.
Thank
Yes, I can address that in the table that you have in the staff report, as well as in PowerPoint. All of the grants are Measure A and Measure W. They're combining those sales tax, Measure A sales tax and Measure W sales tax. The only one that is federal grant is the North Rollins Road, which is $3.1 million. That's from the old One Bay Area grant program, One Bay Area 3 program.
And I think that's helpful for the community to understand too, because those Measure A and W dollars are their sales tax revenue. And someday we'll have to reauthorize those, but and the federal grants are wonderful too, but those sales tax dollars we're a self-help county and those dollars are coming back to Burlingame through a competitive process that our staff works really hard to put terrific grant applications, and it's very competitive. And we win them because they're great projects. So
Well,
thank
thank you
you.
for your great work at the Transportation Authority. I think the city has a great representation there.
Agreed. Thank you to Councilmember Beach for her tireless efforts to promote Burlingame and better outcomes across the peninsula. Just finally, for me anyway, on traffic calming improvements, the 50,000, is that sufficient for the work that we've identified in the different neighborhoods?
We, that is what we are budgeting right now, but should we need more funds, we will definitely come back to city council. We have initiated a number of projects this year, and some of them are going to go into construction, such as the Mercy School area and other bike boulevard as well. We are putting some speed cushions, but we will certainly take a look at our program and see if we need more funds. We'll come back.
Just speaking personally, this is a relatively small line item with really big community appreciation, in those neighborhoods. So I think probably none of us would want to not do something because we, for want of $25,000 or something.
Definitely.
Thank you.
We'll make a note of that. Thank you.
On the next slide here, we have some concept preliminary drawings. This still needs a public input and a design. But here on the North Rollins Road, currently we have 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, northbound, southbound. And we're showing here a road diet, which is eliminating 1 lane, having a left turn pocket in both directions, 1 lane of travel in each direction, parking on both sides, and a protected bike lane on both sides. Next slide. Here's another concept drawing of the Class 1 bike lane that is proposed on California Drive between Oak Grove and Burlingame Avenue. This is on the east side near the tracks, and it's a Class 1 bike lane. And it connects to the project that we're currently working on between Broadway and Oak Grove. Next slide. This one shows some traffic calming on South Rollins Road. We're showing some schematic traffic circles here. So if you're going northbound on Rollins, you're going to have to go around the traffic circle. It slows you down. And then also you have more pedestrian crosswalks on Oak Grove and Bloomfield. In the middle, it shows the chicanes here, which we can, if you're going northbound on Rollins, it allows you to slow down by going around the rubberized medians. Next slide. And here's some concept drawings at Occidental and Ralston. Here we're showing a quick build option, which can be done with temporary striping. And then we can come back with a more permanent solution, such as curb and gutter, concrete curb and gutter, and landscape improvements, as shown on the one on the right. They're all concepts and schematic drawings, which need more design and thought.
Vice Mayor Coulson.
Thank you. Thank you very much. This, the one on Occidental, I just take this opportunity to share out with colleagues real quick, just that the neighbors have been asking repeatedly for this, and there was a hit and run. Thank you to Chief Matucci. They were able to find the culprit of that particular accident, which I appreciate. The police were right on it. But, and also I want to thank the chief for putting, I think it's you guys who put the speed reminder up. It seems like that's getting just a lot of traction. And just really think that these improvements are in this because the neighborhood's really, wearing thin on it, and they really appreciate it. So just to let you know, we've been meeting and working on that.
Thank you.
Slide. So this shows some techniques and strategies we've been installing for bicycle and pedestrian traffic improvements. The first one is a high visibility crosswalk. So unlike the typical crosswalk where you just have 1 stripe on either side, it has vertical bars. This one's called piano or continental. And it kind of like makes it more bold and stands out. We're installing new 4-way stops where it's warranted. We're installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons or RFBs. These are where you press the button, it flashes the light, and it's typical at mid-block crosswalks. We're also installing greenback share arrows to designate the bike boulevards. We're installing speed humps in certain areas to get people to slow down. And we're installing more striping around the city, which becomes more and more important with driver assist and self-driving cars. Slide. This slide shows citywide pedestrian improvements. So first shows what's been identified in pink. Then in blue, it shows the projects that have been completed. And then it shows the ones we received grant funding. And lastly, it shows the orange improvements, which are along El Camino Real, which we're working on the project concurrently with Caltrans, the El Camino Real renewal project. This map here shows the areas that we'll be working on with the sidewalk repair program. Next slide. Now we're on to the building facilities improvements. One of the main things here is that the general fund request is 0, and we're requesting impact fees. The first project we're asking to be funded is the roof replacement at the PD. The PD is almost 40 years old. It has an old tar and gravel roof, flat roof, and is in need of replacement. I'm requesting $600K to fund that project. Project is the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning and energy management system at the courtyard. This will give us a new energy efficient building. And we're requesting $170K of impact fees. And then we'll be requesting additional water and sewer funds that we'll request in the May meeting. Is the city minor facilities project. This is $100K that we're requesting. And this is usually funds minor projects, minor facilities projects such as the new office and finance or the city manager's new cubicle. Slide, please.
Just a second, Mr. Okada. Yes,
Yes.
Member Beach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I apologize for not thinking to bring this up in advance. There was some traffic, email traffic from a constituent a few months ago, but just ask staff or even colleagues' opinion if, and it could be a long-term thing, but as we're talking about police department and building facility improvements, it was brought to my attention that our police department is a building that used to have a flagpole, as a municipal building. And right now we have the little flags coming off the building, but most civic buildings or in the past we've had one. And is that something we might want to consider installing, as it is an important civic building to have a proper flagpole? And that would cost money. And I don't know where that fits in the priority queue, but as it is a 40-year-old building and, it was a former chief of police that brought it up, some military folks have brought it up too in the past, and it might be just worth thinking about. I don't know where that fits, but thank you for considering.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Beach.
Properly lit and the way it should.
Olson.
Oops, sorry, I keep forgetting that button doesn't go. So I think I really appreciate Councilwoman Beach bringing this up. And I think there's another element of that, which is safety. Women who are by themselves in a car and are trying to locate our police station, if there was sort of a tall flagpole that was a little bit of a beacon, I think it just alerts people that this is a civic building. If you feel that you're in any kind of trouble or danger and you need to go somewhere safe, having that also is an opportunity to, just highlight where safety is.
Yeah, especially as development is happening. And we do have a safety exchange there too, as far as well lit for people who want to, as we have an exchange for people who buy things online can go there. And so it's another, thank you for considering that.
You're welcome.
Slide, please. This is the parking lot and garage fund. We're requesting $300K of the parking lot fund to repair parking lot G. This is the parking lot near St. Catharines, and we're looking at drainage and new paving for this parking lot. Here's the street resurfacing project. We're requesting 2.35 million, which is broken up into gas tax, SB1, and Measure I. This is a preliminary list, and we'll provide a list again in May. And the next slide will show a map showing the locations. Is airport around the new Facebook campus. The northbound lane is need of repair. The southbound lane was repaired with the project. Next slide. And finally, a summary of the distribution of the CIP draft, CIP recommendations. Parks and Rec is requesting a little less than 7 million. Bike ped and traffic improvements, less than 10 million. Building facilities, 870K, mostly from impact fees. Parking garages, 300K from the parking lot fund. And street resurfacing, 2.35 million from gas tax SB1 and Measure I, for a total of 20.335 million. And I believe one more slide, which shows the summary of proposed CIP by funding source. So as we talked about, general fund is 5.22 million. Measure I is 2 million, 1 million for sidewalks, 1 million for streets. And we're requesting more funds from impact fee, 2.4, developer contribution of 2 million. And we've had a number of grants that we were awarded or applied for, almost 6 million, for the total of 20.335 million. And with that, I'll ask for any council feedback or questions.
Excellent presentation, Mr. Okada. Thank you so much. Are there comments or questions for the team?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just make sure that we do include what a council member or Vice Mayor Colson brought up. I think that's important. I think that's the kind of big lesson I'm taking home tonight is we need to be careful how we spend our money. I think that should be a priority, and I'm 100%. But thank you for bringing it up.
So just to be clear, because she raised a couple of things, we're talking about.
Oh, I'm talking about the batting.
Batting.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
And I appreciate that. I think there was a consensus around that. I did think there was a larger question, which Vice Mayor Colson put on the table as well. So that's the Parks Yard. But that's obviously a more complex project, but perhaps we could get a report when the Public Works Director has a moment that sort of tell us what's at stake and what the sort of scope is, and then we could think about how to try to prioritize it. I don't think we know what the scale is.
Right. Just to briefly mention, as it is in our master plan of improvements, and we need to prioritize that in line with other priorities. And then, and when we have that information, we will come before council. And with regards to the batting cage project, I think I will sit down with Margaret to see what the needs are, and then we'll come before council to present you that the additional funding for that.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr.
One last plug for my
Yes.
the OBAG 3 grant came through CCAG.
Okay.
So
You're
wanted to point that out. Thank-
not just Councilmember Beach who's pulling her weight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
Have a couple million to Measure I in there too, so.
Claim some credit. Very good. Are there any other inputs or to the capital improvement budget? Yes, Councilmember Stevenson.
Thank you, Mayor Brownrigg. I think one of the things to think about is we kind of do a master plan around a big project, but maybe there's some phasing that those can be broken up so that we can get benefits sooner. I'm thinking specifically around the park yard, partly ADA related, but partly, just need. And maybe those can span more than just single CIP fiscal year requests and look at it. That might change some of the prioritization where things can move up the schedule because they're not quite as big, but they get the project started in a feasible way. And then you can go to the next phase of that on a different timeline. So that's just kind of an observation.
Thank you.
Sure.
Unless I don't see any other questions or comments. Oh, right. Thank you so much. Are there any comments from the public? Okay.
We have no hands raised on Zoom.
Okay. I feel somewhat intellectually bound to point out that we have had commentary with respect to an element of the California bike plan. I don't think that's the plan that we are approving here in terms of spending, right? The part that's, am I right about that, Director?
That is correct. That plan has been previously
Yeah,
fired. Yeah.
right. So whatever anybody's concerns might be, we're not making them worse or we're not doing anything tonight that sort of solidifies it. It's already been done.
exactly. That project is not on the,
Not on the agenda. Okay. Yes, oh no, sorry. Well, so then, thank you very much. And it's a little bit, I'm still learning the hybrid, who's where. But I think that brings our meeting to an end unless there is, perhaps I'll let the city manager have the last word.
Thanks, Mayor Brownrigg. And again, I'm sorry I couldn't be there tonight. Illness is preventing me from joining you, but I will be back by Monday. I just want to thank our team, Helen and the finance staff, and Syed and Kevin and the public works staff who work so hard to provide the information that you all need to be able to make good decisions. This is, as Helen mentioned, this is just part one. We will be back to you in May with the budget hearing and then adoption in June. That's our normal schedule. And as we go on, the team will be working very hard with all the department directors and their budget staff to make sure that what we bring you in May makes sense and is something that you'll be able to pass in June. So again, I apologize for not being there, but I do really want to appreciate all the staff who are there in the audience. I can see most of them right now, and thank you, Lee. And everyone just did such a great job preparing for tonight. In the face of everything that's been going on, the past 6, 8, 10 weeks have been really pretty crazy with the weather. And so all of our parks folks and public works and police and fire have been out constantly dealing with all the cleanup and keeping people safe. And so on top of all that, they put out a really good budget presentation and CIP presentation. So kudos to everyone who worked on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam City Manager. That's a great way to end the meeting. I call the meeting adjourned.
Thank you.